Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here in a couple minutes. Hey, y'all, we're going to get started here in just a minute. Let some more people trickle in here. Okay, I'm Evan Milburn, and welcome to the current installment of the Disabled Leadership Speaker Series. I'm going to cover some Zoom accessibility basics for you guys. Thank you. So we do have captioning in the toolbar section. Should be a CC. We'll click on the CC in the square and the closed caption button, and we'll click show subtitles. Or we do have a screen text link, which is in the chat. Which is in the chat, so you can follow along with it on that side as well. So we have Q&A section where you can ask, send in your questions for Rebecca about what we've talked about, or just about anything. We can also raise our hand if it's more accessible. We'll unmute you to ask a question if that's easier for you. We also have a chat feature, so you can talk about what's been said and what's been going on during these conversations. But before we begin, I want to take a minute to thank some amazing people, both on stage with me and behind the scenes. Amazing mentors from CFLC for sharing their wisdom and expertise, assisting us. Even Russell, who can't make it today, unfortunately. I've got Rebecca Cokley for taking time from her day, obviously busy day, to come and tell us more about her life as an advocate, what inspires her, and how we can help her carry out her message. And obviously, our amazing captioner for providing access needs to all of you guys. You can follow Yo on social media on Twitter at hashtag Yo Disabled Leadership, all one word, or at Yo Disabled Proud. Again, that's all one word. Or on Instagram, you can follow us at hashtag Yo Disabled Leadership or at Yo Disabled and Proud. And we're also on TikTok, at Yo Disabled and Proud on TikTok. We want to know about, we may not get all your questions, but we do appreciate them. So about the speaker series, this is our third monthly installment. This is where we invite disability activists to speak about their advocacy in the community and how the youth can get involved. We've had some past speakers, such as Alice Wan was our first one, and Nina Kane was our one last month. So we're looking forward to our conversation today with Rebecca. You can find Rebecca on Instagram and on Twitter at rcoke54 on Instagram or at Rebecca Cokley on Twitter. If you want to follow or connect with me or any of the other youth leads who will be connecting with new youth, my Instagram is sir.whiteknight0701 or at edmeister.milburn on Twitter. And I'll pass it off to Tatum and my fellow youth leads, youth volunteers to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Tatum Tricarico, and I am going to be one of the two interviewers today. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am in front of a white wall, and I am a white woman with long brown hair and a pink t-shirt, brown glasses, and a headband that has pinks and orange and yellow stripes, and I am functionally blind. And my social media is blind person in area. So on Instagram, it's blind_person_in_area. And on Twitter, it's at blindpersonarea. So that's me. And then I'll pass it off to Cami.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cami Marble. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair that's half up and half down. I am wearing black glasses and a green dress, and I am in front of our purple Yo Disability Leadership series background with the Yo logo in one corner and Rebecca Cokley in the other corner. I will be leading the Q&A today, and if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at marble.cameron. And I'm going to pass off to Olivia to introduce herself next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my Instagram is my name, OLIVIAGLAUBIGER, for all things social media. Today, I will be also interviewing Rebecca, and then I also get to introduce Rebecca. So right now I'm going to do Rebecca's introduction and then allow Rebecca to come and introduce herself and do an image description, and then we will get going with this interview. Rebecca Cokley is a program officer in the President's Office, developing the U.S. Disability Rights Program Strategy, the first of its kind for the Ford Foundation. She was responsible for organizing a campaign that resulted in an unprecedented 12 presidential candidates developing disability policy platforms. A three-time presidential appointee, Rebecca served in key policy roles at the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as a successful stint at the White House, where she oversaw diversity and inclusion efforts for the Obama administration. She is a frequent contributor on CNN, The Washington Post, and Rewire, and has appeared on The Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Please welcome Rebecca Cokley.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Cokley. My pronouns are she, hers. I come to you from Washington, D.C., which is the nexus of the Anacostan and the Piscataway nations. I have shoulder length, or kind of longer than shoulder length. It's been a while since I got a haircut. Red hair, lots of freckles, which I love. I inherited them from my mother. I'm wearing AirPods, a blue cardigan, and a black t-shirt. And I'm sitting in front of my bedspread because I work from the floor of my bedroom at this moment because all of my children have kicked me out of other working places in my house.
Oh, we love the kids. Hopefully we'll be done soon.
It's all good.
To school. All right, let's get into this. So our first question is, how have you been during the quarantine or during the pandemic?
It's been a lot. I changed jobs in the pandemic, which is always strange. I never change jobs at normal times. I usually do the exact opposite of what people say to do. Every time I've been pregnant, I've either been in a new job or just like changed the job in the middle of the pregnancy. And, I just left working for the Center for American Progress to go to the Ford Foundation, which is based in New York. And I currently am not based in New York. And so we're also in the process of working through a move. But, the pandemic has been a lot. I mean, I think it's weighed very heavily on our community. Your previous guest, one of my best friends, Alice Wong, your first guest on this show. And I have spent many a late night talking about the impact of the pandemic on the disability community, from the 2/3 of folks in congregate settings who have passed away because of the coronavirus. The concerns over lack of accommodations for disabled young people in schools, looking at policy failures and policy wins by the old administration and the new administration. It hasn't been boring. It's been a lot, but I'm really excited and eager to think about the opportunities that come as we move forward from this point.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know it's a very interesting time, especially as disabled people in this climate. So we always want to kind of start with that and just note kind of this time that we are in history. But I think kind of my first question that I have for you that I want to I don't know, hear your story behind, I guess, is what what brought you into advocacy, and what what led up to you embracing even I don't know, a unique journey with disability pride, or whatever that means to you. We're the Yo Disabled and Proud group. So how did you get to a place where you were ready to sort of be there?
I also realized, and thank you for asking that. That's a great question. I realized in my introduction, I didn't say that I have achondroplastic dwarfism, which is the most common form of dwarfism. I was never born not proud, and I realized that that's rare. Both of my parents had the same kind of dwarfism I had. I was raised in the disability community in the Bay Area. I'm a California native. In the height of the late 70s, early 1980s. And so I grew up, I rode into the movement on the back of my godmother, Annie Capola Freeman's wheelchair. And, remember going to protests and advocacy activities with her in Berkeley when I was really young. My dad ran a Center for Independent Living, and my mom ran a disabled student center. So it was the family business in a lot of ways. My dream was actually always to be a civil rights lawyer, but I couldn't pass the LSAT with a decent score. My brain does not do logic models, and I tried really hard time and time again, from individualized tutoring to paying all the money for all those classes and all those books, and I couldn't beat it. Or I couldn't get a score that was acceptable to land in a law school, and I ended up taking a totally different course and took a couple years off. I worked for my Congressman Tom Lantos, who was the only member of Congress who was a Holocaust survivor. And I worked for Victoria's Secret at Hillsdale Shopping Center in San Mateo, California, and worked my way up into corporate leadership with the company. And it's not a typical advocate's path by any means, but I'm so glad I had that time working retail, because once you talk to somebody about their underwear, there really is nothing that you're afraid to talk to them about, which has actually made me so much more effective in my work, doing advocacy work, doing, when I was at CAP, engaging with the Hill and talking to members of Congress and presidential candidates, to even now engaging with philanthropy and foundations. I think, I'm used to always being the only person like me in the room. And I think the reason I was never made uncomfortable by it was because I was raised in a household where I saw my experience reflected back by my mom and dad. And that had a really huge impact on me. I grew up never thinking that my body was weird, never thinking that, I wish I had longer legs, or, not a big Akon forehead that so many of us have. That was just part of who we were. And that was part of the infinite beauty of the diversity of our disability community.
That was an incredible answer. And I just thank you for clarifying your achondroplasia-ness. And I would also like to say I do have achondroplasia too. So Rebecca and I share that. And so it goes great. It's a great transition into the next question, which I'm so curious to hear your answer about. there's, change in our world, and including, all things. We are seeing disability and advocacy so differently today than we used to see it. How has the disability, specifically little people community, transformed over your lifespan?
That's a really great question. I would first say that I am eternally grateful that I grew up in the little people community in the days before social media. Both in terms of how social media is used sort of internally in LPA, but also in terms of how people treat LPs in public and will take videos of us and try to find means and mechanisms to mock us and exploit us for public consumption. And that's really hard. And I find myself being really reactionary to it also as a mom of 3 kids. My oldest 2, my 10-year-old and my 7-year-old, both also have achondroplasia. And, growing up, my parents had very different approaches to like the public. My mom was the middle of 9 kids. Everybody else was average height except for her. And so her response was always, well, just be the bigger person, just ignore them. And my dad was like a judge's son from Alabama, and like everybody was his friend, or he treated everybody like they were his friend. So he would go up to literally anybody that stared at us wherever we were and be like, "Hi, I'm Billy. What's your name?" My daughter's in the background. And I would just be like, "Oh my God, Dad, can you not do this?" And I would react with a lot of anger. Like I would be like, "What the hell is your problem?" I think I probably got in trouble for flipping somebody off for the first time when I was in like 4th grade. Because there was somebody on the street with like a Polaroid camera, and I saw them take a picture of my mom and I like turned around and gave them the finger. And my mom was like, "Rebecca." And I was like, why is it okay for them to have the privilege of walking around in public spaces being safe and being who they are, and we don't get the same level of respect? So I've always had a different approach. And honestly, as a parent, it's weird for me now because I really try to be supportive of my kids figuring out what works for them, and with the knowledge that it's going to change over time. How I've seen LPA shift. It has been exciting to see organizationally the LP community move into more advocacy work. I do significantly worry about the impact of reality shows on our community. That being a principal way that people get exposed to us. I don't think it's necessarily always the best kind of exposure. But it sells. I growing up, I remember when the only career opportunities there were at convention were Radio City Music Hall coming to recruit people to be elves. And like every year they would come and do like the Rockettes would come and do auditions. And I remember my mom, who was an officer, saying, like, having a real problem with it and being like, why do we invite them in to take away our young people instead of taking our young people to college campuses during our convention? We're here in a top tier city for an entire week. Like, why are we giving our young people to Hollywood instead of investing in their futures? And I think that's something I still really struggle with, is like, I've seen that sort of get replaced by like the reality show gamut, and they've called me repeatedly and I keep telling them, no, I don't want to be their little lobbyist. Because I don't think people have a right to me as a product. But I do feel like there's a lot more that we can do. I've been pleased to see the level of advocacy LPA is engaging in, and I'm particularly pleased to see LPA acknowledge their missteps on being truly inclusive of our community, whether it be LGBT folks, whether it be specifically the treatment of African Americans in LPA, which has frankly been atrocious for decades and has always been. I'm from a mixed race family. That really matters to me. And in a lot of ways, that's a major reason why I pulled away from LPA in some respects, was because I wanted my family to be in places where they saw families like theirs and where they were welcome. And to hear how African American LP leaders like Kathy Woods or Kara Reedy or others have been treated makes me really angry. And I will point out, for the image description, there is a 7-year-old with a ponytail sitting at the top corner of my camera frame. And that is my daughter, Kaya, who is named after Willow's wife, in the movie Willow.
Oh, cool. Love that. Yeah, thank you for that answer. That was super helpful and like I don't know, just kind of shows like where there's still so much room I think left to grow and like I don't know, so many good parts of like the community and then so much room left. I think one of my questions for you, and you touched on this a little bit, but I think in particular, we hear a lot about the LP community and other, like, quite frankly, like a bunch of other communities within disability kind of breaking off from the disability community. And so, like, I don't know, like, I'm functionally blind, and a lot of people are like, oh, like, we're blind, we're not disabled or whatever. And I think that I at least have heard that is the case with the LP community and with like several other disability communities. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on intersectionality, both in the intersectionality of like cross disability, and then also, as you were talking earlier, just intersectionality in the disability community. So kind of a two-part question. Like what is cross disability?
Definitely. I think being really clear about what we mean by intersectionality really matters.
Yeah.
And the way that Dr. Crenshaw described it is it's not about overlapping identities, it's about overlapping oppressions and how, sexism, ableism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia can all sort of weigh in on a person and create these structures that are always grounded in white supremacy. Because if you're talking about intersectionality, it's always, the first layer is always race. And this is actually a learning moment for the disability community. We use the term a lot to talk about, like, we'll walk into a room of diverse folks with disabilities and be like, what an intersectional room. And that's actually not what that means. And so being like, just as we're very intentional about what independent living means, when people talk about institutions and say, yeah, but they're in that institution's in the community, we're like, no, that's not independent living. We have to be equally cautious of the language that we use to make sure that we're not misconstruing what was meant by, a framework that is being used in a lot of places today that's always grounded in racism. I think the LP community was one of the last communities to sign on to the ADA back in 1990. And I think there is there's a challenge when a disability is hereditary and it's passed down family to family to family. You see something similar in the deaf community, and you're starting to see something very similar in the autistic community, where because of that, the community turns to itself for resources instead of turning outward to learn from other disabled people. Because there's always LP adults that average height people can sit and talk to learn about how to raise their kids. They're not having to necessarily turn to an external source in a lot of ways, even though sometimes they still do. I think that there has been a lot of shifting the last several years. I give Gary Arnold and Ruth Ricker, former presidents of LPA, a lot of credit for that, because I think that they both really drove agenda within LPA to make LPA engage more with the broader diversity community. And I think that there is still a lot of room to grow. I think I've been pleased to see LPA weigh in more on issues that really matter and come to the table. But what I've seen more of, and I'm proud of it, is I've seen more individual LPs stepping out into the advocacy space than doing it as part of LPA. And I want to give a lot of credit to Becca Bailey from the Minneapolis area, who literally put on her life on the line to save the Affordable Care Act, which ensured that we all still have access to healthcare without discrimination. And Becca did it as part of her leadership at the Center for Popular Democracy and some other groups, and not as part of LPA. And I would have loved to have seen like a bus of LPs show up and be like, you're not going to take our healthcare. And while we're not there yet, it's my hope that we eventually get there.
Wouldn't that just be so cool? Like a whole freaking bus
I
of
wish.
LPs and like just take over.
I would love to. I mean, Congress would not know what to do if a bus full of little people drove up to the United States Congress and unloaded and said, "You are not taking our healthcare." I can tell you that the Congressional Police Department would not know what to do. You know, and I know a lot of those guys, and I mean, usually they know me and they know Becca, and so they're like, "Oh, it's Rebecca and Becca," like. And then when they realized that we knew each other and we're friends, like there have been times I've run into them, they're like, "Oh, you know, Becca's in town from Minnesota. She got arrested last night." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm picking her up for dinner today." You know, but I mean, it really would be amazing. And I think the challenge is figuring out what is the issue that would get our community so enraged or so positively fired up that we would see that level of advocacy from our folks. And, you know, I think the time for it definitely was around the ADA and the leadership of folks like Paul Miller from our community, but there's still, I mean, the work is far from done. I mean, I know across communities, like there would be support for a bill that would prevent people from taking photos of disabled people in public. Like, I think something like that would be massive. You know, or like a safe schools bill, because we know how horrifically bullied our kids are. But I think I continue to eagerly wait till, you know, there's a moment where I watch a bus pull up in front of the Capitol, which is 12 blocks from my house right now, and a whole bunch of LPs get off to go meet with their members and talk to Congress about what matters to them.
I hope that too. And I really don't know what it's going to take to trigger the community to feel like that's a possibility and we have every right to do that and like do it. This isn't a question we actually had written up on our questions, but I personally think it would be very interesting to ask and hear your opinion about, which, you know, it's still talking about LPA. LPA decided to hired an average height person for their director of the organization.
You're gonna get me thrown out of the organization, Olivia. I love this. Okay, let's go.
What do you think? I mean, personally, as you know, I'm gonna be authentic. Like it hits hard when you have this entire organization of, you know, LPs and they put in charge an average who doesn't know what we experience. You know, it's just impossible. And I don't take away the fact that you maybe had a child who, you know, you raised as an LP, but it's not the same. What are your thoughts?
LP has only ever had average height people be their executive directors. The first executive director was also average height. Or the first the long-term one. There was a short one for a period of time in Texas who has dwarfism. And then it was Joanna Campbell from Los Angeles, who's another average height parent. I think that there are sufficiently and even more qualified LPs that could do that job. I wonder what it says about our organization culturally that we feel like we have to have an average height person in charge of us. And I aspire to a day where LPA is much better funded and has a full-time, like 100% full-time on-site team engaging on government affairs, on public relations, on advocacy work, on supporting our districts and chapters, because we're nothing without our districts and our chapters, our regions and our chapters now, because I guess we have regions. You know, there's also a reason. I mean, it's interesting because I've often been asked why I don't run for office in LPA. Because my mom was a vice president for much of my adolescence and my childhood. You know, or as I like to call it, my Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, Paris Hilton days. Because we, as I said, I'm very thankful that social media did not exist during my teen years or my 20s. I've been really intentional about that because my mom was always in board meetings growing up. And my dad had passed away by that point, and so I was being raised by a single mom. And LPA was the one convention a year, or was the one trip a year we could afford. And it wasn't a vacation. My mom worked the entire week. And so I've been really deliberate and intentional and not wanting to be in and not running for office in the organization because I want to be present for my kids. I want to like go to the pool with my kids. I want to see if there are sketchy ass older men hitting on my daughter that I'm going to have to take out back and have a conversation with. And you can't do that if you're a mom and you're in board meetings 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
And so, you know, but there are amazing leaders in our organization, folks like Colleen Giuffreda, who does phenomenal work supporting families at Hopkins and also runs the LPA adoption campaign, which is amazing. You know, Becca Bailey, there's so many folks that I think could easily step in and do that work. And I look forward to the day that LPA is ready to have an LP executive director.
Thank you for that answer. And just to let Tatum know, I'm gonna do the school one still to add that in, and then
Go for it.
So moving on to, sorry if that's a loud noise. I go to UCSB, which is obviously a public university. And you went to UCSC, which is Santa
I'm a
Cruz.
slug.
Yes, banana
slug.
slug.
Yes,
A
mascot.
gaucho and a banana slug.
Yes, this is history in the making.
You know, public education and universities are their own jumble of fun that love to just be so accessible and inclusive all the time, right? And like obviously times have changed. Like you went to school, you know, a little bit ago and things have changed, or maybe they haven't. What was your experience like growing up as a student with a disability, specifically at the public university? Were your needs met? Did you tell me about it?
I was a bit of a ringer. My mom ran a disabled students program at a community college. And so I was part of my 504 plan starting in kindergarten. Like my parents had me there because they were like, no, you need to understand what your needs are in case there's a substitute teacher. And they try to tell you that, no, you can't take the stool into the bathroom. Or no, you don't get extra time to go to the assembly so you don't get trampled in the hall by all the fifth graders. You know, and so my parents I was really blessed by that because I really went in the door knowing what I wanted and knowing what I had a right to. You know, at Santa Cruz, the thing I loved about Santa Cruz is the fact that Santa Cruz is such a funky, eclectic, weird town, or at least it was still even the last time I was there, that me being a little person wasn't at all interesting. Like, it was just like, oh, there's a little person. Hi, little person. Like, there's a guy who just put Mr. Bubbles in the town fountain and now we're having a foam party. Like, that was what Santa Cruz was like. It was, I mean, it is its own very distinct, very, like, we used to always call it the last bastion of democracy and liberalism in America when I went to school there. Like, we didn't have letter grades because we protested and said, I'm sorry, we grade meat, not people. And so we didn't get letter grades until my senior year. Like, that's how groovy and crunchy Santa Cruz was. And it was not my first choice. My dream school was Berkeley. And I got into Berkeley, I got into Santa Barbara, but I got a full ride to Santa Cruz. And my parents, it's funny, my parents separated because my mom decided to go back to college. And my dad got like super upset about it. And so he literally had like movers come and empty out our house the day after my mom got accepted to college. And they had a very public LPA divorce, which was super messy. And so my mom, though, was riddled with all kinds of college debt. And I, you know, when I got a full ride to Santa Cruz, I applied to all the UCs because you can do that. And Santa Cruz offered me a 100% full ride. And my mom was like, you're taking it. I don't care. And I was like, but I want to go to Berkeley, or I want to go to UCLA. I want to go further away. And my mom was like, don't care, full ride. Like, you will not regret this when you graduate, and your friends are, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and you're not. And she was right. You know, and I mean, when I was at Santa Cruz, it was really interesting. The only real issue I had, and it was so weird that they were so obnoxious about it, but I actually saw somebody posting about this at Santa Cruz on Twitter this last week, was around parking. And my first year, there was no problem with me getting parking, like accessible parking on campus. And then the following years, they were just jerks. And I literally, at one point, because of the scholarship I had to I emailed the president of the university and was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. Like Dr. Greenwood, I'm really sorry to bother you, but you guys gave me the scholarship because of my advocacy in the disability space. And I'm being told that I don't deserve access to a disability parking space. And they want me to walk like a mile plus to the shuttle and whatever. And no, this isn't going to work. But it's also that skill set of like, it really continued to remind me it's about who you know and how you talk to people. And the disadvantage of being an LP is that we're so recognizable, and that's also the advantage because people don't forget us. And so my mom's rule in college was always like, know the security guards, know the janitorial staff and the building facilities. And I remember like wanting to loft my bed my senior year and like being like, how am I going to loft my bed? I'm watching all the guys in my dorms do it. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. And the facilities guy walked by who I'd known since my freshman year. His name was Cicero. And I was like, hey, Cicero, I want to loft my bed. You know, like how I do it? And he was like, you're not going to do it. I'm going to go call 3 guys and we're going to loft your bed in the next 20 minutes. Because I'd always been nice to him and always been respectful. And so I think that was I realized that like, that was the way, there was a legal way to get things done. And then there was like a networking way of getting things done. And that sometimes a networking way of getting things done, though you don't do the paperwork, is a lot more effective. But one of the things I really want to see, I want to see a comprehensive like US News and World Report style survey on the ADA accessibility and inclusion of college campuses for students with disabilities, because we don't have anything like that. So many times we end up making decisions of colleges based on what we see in the brochures, or if we get a chance to travel and don't understand that like they might have a really horrible disabled students office, or there might be construction happening that's going to make like campus life really hard. And so that's actually one of the things I keep hoping that somebody will send me a funding proposal on, because I'm like, yes, I want something like that.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I'm very with you in that. That would be very cool. And thank you for that just like honest answer of like, this is, I don't know, this is, you have to do that like extra networking, that extra like, I don't know, just like thinking ahead of things to try to get access.
I also think it's a safety thing for us a lot of times too, as people with disabilities. I mean, I know that, I would bet that for the group of us on this call, when we're out in public on our own, we are consciously or subconsciously aware of our safety at all points in time. And part of how we keep ourselves safe is like, where your people are and you know where to find people that can help you. And so I think that that's another thing for me where it's always been like, oh no, I need to know. Like when I would check in at a hotel at a Little People convention, I always knew at least 2 people at the front desk. I knew a housekeeper, I knew a bartender. Like I always made sure they knew my name and I knew their name. And for me, more than anything, it was about making sure that I was safe in the space.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I feel like that in some ways ties in a little bit to our next question, kind of just the question is more broad, but I want to pin it maybe a little bit differently. The question that we have written here is just like, how has ableism impacted your life in these different areas? And I think also in kind of the work that you've done with government, even though we haven't really like got into that all that much, but I think kind of like you're saying with the safety aspect of it, there's part of it that's ableism, part of it that's probably like sexism working in on that too, obviously. And
Totally.
so I'm wondering kind of if you could talk about like a little bit of the connection there and like what, I don't know, just the impact that that's made on your life even more like explicitly as a little person.
I think from the moment I get out of my bed, which I have a giant 4-poster bed that was clearly built for an average height person, but I like it because it's cool. To the moment I go downstairs and have to climb on step stools to get my breakfast out of the cabinet, to going out to my vehicle that I drive with assistive technology, I live in a world that has been structurally built by and for average height non-disabled people. And so I think it's really interesting in conversations with some of my non-disabled friends to remind them, it's like, no, I don't have the luxury of not thinking about access at any point in the day. You know, in the work that I did in government, it was really interesting, because no matter how important your title is, no matter where you work or who you work for, um, the ableism is always there. There's always a moment where somebody finds a way to remind you that people like you, in their perception, don't belong there. And I remember a time when I was working for the administration, I was meeting with a civil rights leader. And he came into my office, and we had known each other, we had met each other a couple of times at events, but he wanted to ask for a favor from the administration about a conference that they were hosting. And he wanted us to try to help get some speakers there. And so we walked into my office, and I had like a couple of conversations with him over the years, but like we hadn't really like sat and like had like a getting to know you type conversation, I guess. And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh my God, itsy bitsy Rebecca Cokley has this really big office. How did you get this job? Did you get this job? Did an organization that starts with special call and for organization for special people get you this job working for President Obama?"
That's horrifying.
And my office was set up. It was really funny. At the time, I had 3 office mates, and they were all dudes. My office mates were always dudes, except for my one office mate, Nicole, who's a brilliant Black woman. And there's this table in the center of the room, and there were 4 desks at each corner of the room, but the desks had their back towards the table. And so it's almost like that show. What is that show on where like you have they pick a musician and the judges like spin their chair around and like hit a button if they decide who they want to pick. And that's how my office worked. Like
The Voice.
The Voice, yes. As this guy says this to me, every one of my office mates like spins around and like leans their head on their chin to be like, "Hopefully, what are you going to say? What are you going to say?" And I remember just being so shocked and not knowing what to say, because I literally was sitting in the White House, and I was like, I could see the residents from my window. And I knew that I had worked really hard to get where I was. And I knew that Paul Miller had fought for me to get in the White House behind him. And I knew that I could curse this dude out, and it might mean I lose my job, but I would feel like my soul was intact. I could like go my dad's route, and be the funny guy, but there was nothing about it that was funny, and it was just really hard in that moment. And I've had moments like that, but it was just a genuine reminder to me that no matter how good you are, no matter how hard you work, there are still going to be people in this world that don't see you as their equal. And the funniest bit was that person reached out to me when I landed in my new job and asked me for money. And I haven't responded to that email yet. But it always comes back around. Never forget the people that treated you like crap. I take advice from my sister, Alice Wong. I maintain a spreadsheet of nemesis. It's lessons I learned from her and Roxanne Gay. Like, keep your list, keep your receipts. But I think no matter how much money you have, how much power you have, what people you have access to, the world has a way of reminding you that people like us aren't supposed to be successful. And that's hard. And I think that's also why having a network of, I have a network of other LP women. I have a network of disabled women that I worked with in the Obama White House that I talk to all day about stuff. And we lean on each other for that sort of thing. And that's why that peer support is really important. But it's okay to admit that it sucks. I think it's actually more powerful to admit it sucks. I don't want to talk to a leader who's like, "I've never been challenged. Nobody's ever mocked me." Like, I have no time for that shit. Tell me about your struggles. Tell me about like how you get by on a day-to-day in this world that is not built for us.
Thank you so much for that. Just that honest response to that, because I know so many people who've gone through similar things, not in the White House, obviously. So many different, just horrifying situations. Yeah. Olivia.
Yeah, and when it happens in the White House, it just shows like the reality of the fact that like it comes with the beingness of being disabled. Like it's gonna come everywhere. Like even the highest, where you're making policies, you still face ableism.
My predecessor, Paul Miller, when he worked there, when he first got his law degree from Harvard, he was told that he couldn't, that no law firm would hire him because they were not looking to audition for a circus. And, it's that sort of, and, he had passed away at the point that I had that moment in the White House, or he would have been my phone call. But I had a Post-it note that I still have in my office stuff that says WWPMD, which is what would Paul Miller do? Because though we had very different approaches, it was always important to me that Paul set a stage for me to enter, and that I've done that for other LPs coming behind me. And so also being conscientious of like the fear of like the negative impact of like being the angry little person.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is really scary. I can attest to that and agree with you. Now we are going to go into live Q&A. And so Cami is going to take on that role. Welcome, Cami.
Hello. So we have some questions coming in about your career in politics. And so kind of wrapping those all into one question.
Oh gosh.
You've had such a rich career in federal politics. How has that journey been? I think you've talked about that a little bit. And what have you been most proud of in your career thus far?
It's been amazing. I love politics. I love helping people who are policymakers make the right decisions for our community. And I love educating them about our community. I think last 2020 was mind-blowing. I mean, yeah, the number of candidates we had, right platforms, the fact that both Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro and Pete Buttigieg all did Twitter chat. Like the three of them did Twitter chats with the community and with Crip the Vote. The fact that Senator Warren and Secretary Castro took debate questions that were not about disability and reframed them on disability. And there actually were 2 or 3 debate questions actually framed on disability for the first time. All of those things are like huge wins. It was a blast. It was fun. It was so fast paced and so much work, and having to work with every different campaign, which had their own infrastructure, their own ideas about how to do things. But because of the fact that we started with like 25 Democratic candidates, everyone was looking for a community that hadn't been touched yet, which was really to our advantage. That's how we won. Disability won because we had 25 candidates, and it was the Democratic primary was a mess. And so, to be able to take advantage of that, and everybody wanting to talk to us because everybody wanted, and everybody wanted something different, which I think was cool too. And being able to track that was really powerful. I think the legacy of it is the thing that excites me the most, like watching more and more disabled people run for office. I mean, in the New York State Senate, the New York State Assembly, we have 2 or 3 members of the assembly who are proud, now and disabled. We have California's own Representative Katie Porter, who I absolutely love and is one of my favorite people on the face of the planet. My big sister, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who is one of my dearest friends and someone I talk to all the time about all sorts of random things, who both identify as people with disabilities. And I kind of laughed when the squad got elected because I was like, oh, there's 5 of them. Numerically, one of them has to belong to our community, statistically. And I was like, I'm just going to wait and see which one it was. And the fact that it was Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who is just a complete badass, a rock star, really amazing. And the work that she's been doing specifically around legislation to support Black and brown girls with disabilities has been like, we haven't seen legislators like this before. And so to have them in Congress working with folks like Tammy Duckworth and Senator Warren and others, it's exciting. Like, I thought that would maybe be like another 10 years down the road. I didn't expect that to be happening now. But it's still happening, and it really matters.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about that. I think it's really cool to see disability advocacy becoming more mainstream, for lack of a better word, because it so obviously needs to be.
And we have to be prepared for it too. It's weird. I remember the first time, it was like almost a year ago at this time. It was a year ago, April, during the pandemic. And Senator Warren just picked up the phone and called me. And I answered the phone and I was like, "Hi, this is Rebecca." And I was like handling my 3-year-old. And she was like, "Hi, it's Elizabeth. How are you?" And I was like, "Oh, hi, Elizabeth. How are you?" And then I was like, "Oh my God, hi, Senator Warren." And she called it, asked about how the disability community was doing with the pandemic. And it wasn't anything I expected on a Sunday afternoon, but it was one of those things where, like, I was talking to a couple of friends of mine, and they're like, "Oh no, that's what they do. That's what members do. That's how they stay in touch." And to realize just sort of the developmental steps that our community hasn't had access to yet, that we're now starting to get access to, is really exciting to me. I'm waiting to see which one of y'all is going to run for office, because I will totally help with your campaign. Just tell me when.
I think Tatum looks interested. So we have a question here, or a couple of questions here from Katie from Pennsylvania, who asks, what are some of the most important things for youth with disabilities to understand and about leadership? And what can they do as a program leader to help youth with disabilities?
I think a big piece is like a strong connection to the disability community, to disability history. I think I'm continually blown away by the amazing things that I find out that little people have done in history, or that other people with disabilities have done. And knowing that history makes it feel a lot less lonely, makes it feel like there's a lot more that we can be doing, makes us think more creatively, more nimbly. I think one of the most important things that, like, program leaders can be doing around supporting young people with disabilities, it's going to sound really elementary, but like saying the word disability, using the word disability as an asset, not telling young people with disabilities how to define themselves, not using disability euphemisms. I think it's really damaging, especially to young people that are in sort of their developmental ages. Like being told that, "Oh, you're not this, or you don't have this." Like, I remember being told by people, "You're not disabled, you're just little." And I was like, yeah, but the minute, like, I get denied accommodations, I'm being denied accommodations because I'm disabled. And so I think that's a big piece of it. I think also helping make connections for young people with disabilities on their path going forward, helping be a resource and being a tool for them, and being a safe space to ask questions.
Yes, thank you so much for that advice. And I think that also ties into another question that we had asked by one of our attendees. And I think we are getting close to time to wrap up the event. So I'm going to ask our final question, which is, if you were writing a letter to your younger self, what would you say?
Spend more time in, like, quality time with my mom than fighting with my mom. I lost my dad when I was 10, and I lost my mom at 25. And my mom passed away a week before she would have met my now husband. And so that loss of, as an only child, both my parents lost 2 babies before me and one after me to double dominant dwarfism, which is fatal. And so it's just me. I have aunts and uncles and cousins, but I sort of feel like the term I use is untethered. I sort of feel like a balloon without a string some days. And I wish, in that period of my late teens, early 20s, when, like, you argue with your parents incessantly, like, I wish there would have been less of that. There's about 50 million questions I wish I would have had the chance to ask her that I never did. And that still sort of breaks my heart. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it looks like with that, I think we're about at time to wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder, if you would like to follow Yo Disabled and Proud on our social medias, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Yo Disabled and Proud. And on Twitter, and Instagram, you can follow the hashtag Yo Disabled Leadership. And up next, our next event next month is on July 24th at 11:30 a.m. And we are so excited to have Judy Human coming to share with us. So if you want to register, we have the link on the screen, and it will also be going into the chat shortly. And then today, when you close out this Zoom meeting, a SurveyMonkey link will come up, and that's just to evaluate how we did today. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and thank you to Rebecca for coming. See y'all later.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.